Welcome, listeners, to another episode of the No Ego Podcast. Back by popular demand, I am joined by Alex Dorr.
Thanks for having me again.
I love our riffs together.
Did you make up by popular demand?
I just made it up.
Okay, I love it.
Yeah. I just think if they knew that they could demand us, it would be popular.
Exactly.
I don't know.
I love it.
You know, I think it is popular demand, though, because when we get together and talk just about what we're hearing on the road, people love those sessions because, you know, we put out on Facebook just also what questions do you have? And we got over like 150 responses in less than 24 hours.
Yeah, that was so fun to put out. We had 3.5 hours blocked, and then we were just going to see what happened on Facebook. And it was like, boom.
There's tons
over 100 comments
of questions. So we probably won't get to all 150 questions today. But we do want to use this and other podcasts time to answer these questions. So it's interesting because people get the philosophy and they're liking it, but they run up against just some like ongoing, constant roadblocks at times. Like the ego is so sophisticated that as you develop as a leader, some of your people's egos, yours included, are going to develop like with similar strength, but more ninja power.
Yeah, I found that's a good way to put it. I found it's like we get the basics out there.
Yeah.
And then people are surprised when like the first technique you give them doesn't work. And then we have to talk about how there's like 4 or 5 layers down to like 10 layers where you might have to keep peeling back that ego. So
I think people are also surprised that a lot of times they respond like, that was so simple and it worked.
Yes. So it's both ways.
I think it goes back to where I tell people, I'm like, don't try this on your worst like case, the people running fastest away from you, like the farthest. Like if you're playing tag as a kid, you don't go after the fastest guy who's like halfway down the block. You go after the people that are like right next to you.
With the sprained ankle already.
Exactly. Who slipped on their way out of the chute. I used to wet the grass around, I was 6 or 7, so I was a little kid. I used to wet the grass around the tree that was kind of where you said where everybody ran from.
Yeah.
And so I would get a few slippers. It was
see you. I was always like trying to be like the athlete going after people when I should just been a lot.
Yeah. More strategic.
Yeah. You're
more strategic. I was kind of an athlete, but I was definitely the young one. So, you know, after we get done with this session, a lot of people are like, so how do we start this? We got a lot of great information. And that's when I tell them, I'm like, you know, start this with people who are most open to it. Why? Because you're a novice still learning. And because a lot of those super hard cases, they don't need coaching. What I give to people, what reality-based leadership talks about, this stuff works on people whose toggle switch, you know, we talk about this toggle switch isn't broken. Like people have the ability to self-reflect and they have the ability to take into consideration some feedback. They have a willingness to want to show up in life and they're in touch with that craving for impact. So I say, start with some of your easier people first with full permission. I learned something new. I want to start. And the basic advice is if you get stuck is to, instead of you figuring it out, we got so many questions that are like, I want to figure out how to do this for another.
Yeah.
Go ask them. Like part of it is just like, go ask them, how can I get you more willing? Is there something I can do? Or I laid awake last night thinking about, you know, how to get you more motivated and how'd you sleep last night? And if the answer is I slept great, then that's the problem. Yeah. Is because I think there is a line when we're working way too hard as a leader or a colleague or a peer for somebody else's success. It's no longer shared accountability. It gets into codependency.
Yeah, we've called that a lot. I think you called it in a great way, the danger zone, when you're working harder at someone's development than they are.
Yeah, or their success.
It's a sign. Yeah, absolutely.
It's a sign, and it's a sign that you're hooked. You're ego hooked. Do you think it's their egos are the problem? You're ego hooked. All we can really do is help people have a direct relationship to reality. That's all we can really do. There's two. So if people have good information, they will make better decisions. I believe in this.
Yeah.
Like if somebody comes to me and says, Sai, you spend a little too much money on shoes I'm going to say, no, I don't. And shoes are vital to feeling good about yourself, right? But if you bring me a pie chart from QuickBooks that says the green is your retirement in Mexico and the blue is your shoes, and the blue
colors make it even worse.
If the blue is like really big and it threatens the green, which is me on a beach someplace, that information gets better. And, I was talking, I got to spend some time with Wakeman, who big shout out to Wakeman. We love those folks.
Love those guys.
They're geniuses, just absolute geniuses. And they were talking about thanks and gratitude and the power of just simple thanks. Like, it's mind blowing, but thank people. But anyway, they were talking about that and how it's better if we can put the ability to appreciate and thank directly in the hands of the people rather than like get a bonus once a year that only lasts for about 20 days. So the effect of a bonus in their research, you give somebody $2,000, it lasts like 23 days or something. But if we took that $2,000 and we gave it to like every employee that they could recognize each other with like $100 throughout the year, you'll have these recognitions that last much longer. So the year's covered, right? And so they just talked about, and it's not just about money. It's really just, they're more about appreciation, the power of thanks.
That's a fun way to see the experiment play out.
Exactly. So what was interesting about that is the minute they started to say that, I picked up on, but what about bias? So if I take from the system the ability to recognize people, what about bias? Like, am I just going to recognize people that sound like me or look like me?
Agree with my idea.
Yeah, or agree with my ideas. And are we going to, as a system, we have trouble with bias, even when we're consciously working against it. So a lot of people ask that, and it was genius to me, getting to the point what Wakeman's doing, is they said that, actually, we're starting to give people some real-time data. So you might get some micro-learning, some instant coaching. Like, let's say after you, as an employee, have recognized some people, for 3 months, you'll get a little note back that said, hey, just so you know, we took a look at recognition, and you tend to only recognize people in your geography, or you tend to only recognize, and it's like these micro learnings that are just data-based insights to your own behavior.
And it's super neutral because it's like, here's what the data show. Yeah.
So most feedback is so biased, but data, is a little less biased. There can be bias in the data. Yeah. But anyway, my point is that if people had better information, they would make better decisions. And there's two ways that people get poor information. One is through the lens of their ego. Yep. So their ego is, when there's toggle switched down, when they're looking through life through the lens of ego, they are always seeing the world from a very corrupted viewpoint. Their data is corrupted, right? Because the ego paints you as the victim and you don't have any part in this. Everybody else is the villains. The other way data gets corrupted is in the realm of accountability, when people enable you, right? So they bend your view of reality. And the best motivator is a direct relationship to reality.
Back to the pie chart of the shoes versus Mexico.
Exactly.
And back to
exactly.
The example. Absolutely.
And so that brings us back, when you're working harder for somebody else's success than they are, stop working on them and start working on you and the way you're buffering their direct relationship with reality, and help them through self-reflection to work on their ego. And that's why almost every question we get in, it goes back to foster and facilitate self-reflection to move people beyond ego. You do that through questions or tools, and make sure that you're not corrupting someone's view of the world by your enabling.
Yeah, and even I hear you a lot, the first answer is always stop judging, start helping ourselves. Now, some people think that start helping means jump in and do something. Right. Sometimes it's just pause. Start helping is, where am I enabling, and just getting clear on that before you take your next step.
Exactly. Yeah. How can I foster it? So it's interesting as we're getting all these incredible questions in, and people really want to take a look at, like, what can they do to make somebody else do something? Mm-hmm. My answers are often work with the willing, start with the easy ones. And when you get stuck, stop trying to think it out. Ask the person in front of you, like, what it would take. Ask them how willing they are, where they're at. And a lot of this stuff is, be willing to take some risks, try some things as a relationship, and be willing for it not to work the first time. And so you got to have a good exit strategy. You got to have a way out. It's like, you know what? Why don't we both take a pause here and let's ponder this further and come back together and have more dialogue. And I think it's important that you're always self-reflecting as a leader, that you can come back in and say, you know what? I reflected last night and I think I'm over involved in your success. And so I want to move away from that. Yeah. And here's what I would need from you. And a lot of people just aren't clear and succinct about how reality works.
Yeah.
You know, there's two things I do as a leader every single day. I teach people how their mind works when they're getting played by ego. And I teach people how reality works.
Yeah.
Because people are like, well, I want to do very little. I want to show up and I want to be promoted and I want to have full complaint rights and I want to
be consulted on every decision. And
And it's like, well, I know that's what you want, but that's not how the world works. And so I just had a lot of, I think what we do is we teach people how their mind works and we teach people how the world works.
And I found as you help people understand how their mind works, it's less of going out and trying to fix someone else and more on getting clear yourself. And then the answer comes to you. It's like, and I haven't heard you say that out of this clarity, you would walk right up to that person and say something as beautiful in my mind as I feel like I've really been working on your success harder than you have. And I still want to help, but this isn't working. How can we move together forward from here? And I think from that clarity, that could be really authentic conversations that could actually help that relationship. Mm-hmm. I haven't heard you say that in that way.
I haven't. And I think it's a good recap. It's like clarity on owning my own stuff.
Your lane.
Clarity on what I need from others. Because a lot of times we aren't very clear with other people about what we need and to ask for it. And then to let people tell us what their level of willingness is or not. That type of clear expectations.
Instead of assuming where their willingness is. Yeah. Interesting.
And authenticity, I think, is so important. But a lot of times we really overcomplicate things. We start working everybody else's program but our own. And even as leaders, even though we have some responsibility for the work of others, I would just remind leaders, we don't necessarily manage people. We manage energy of people. And so I can't control you as a person, but I can manage your energy by what I reward, what I enable, what I endorse, what I at times even allow, where I give time and attention to. You know, my yoga instructors, shout out to Jenny and Paul, are amazing. And Paul always says the quality of your life is determined by what you give your attention to. And so as a leader, as an employee, even as an employee, if I have people around me that are gossiping and drama into drama, if I starve it, I mean, I have more power than I think I have because I don't have to give it time and attention.
Absolutely.
I mean, most people are trying to belong. And when you just go, I care about you and I'm walking away now, it leaves them wondering if they might want to change their behavior so they can be in relationship with you.
Definitely. Interesting. Yeah, no, I love it.
You know, one of the questions that I continue to get all the time, it's not really a question. It's kind of a complaint in the form of a question or a question in the form of a
Some
complaint.
Some of them come out that way. Yeah.
I think it's a question in the form of a complaint. People have, the ego helps us believe that we're all really special. And I kind of blow that belief because I'm in so many companies every year that have the same issue. So if you were that special, I wouldn't have just heard this 28 times. And a lot of people go, I can't believe it's like you were listening in my office, like you know what's going on. Human behavior is super predictable, super predictable. So one of the things I'm hearing a lot out there is that like we are so change fatigued. Like people are really convinced that there's like too much change, that they're really change fatigued. Are you hearing that out there?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean,
people are saying it's just going so fast where it's almost gotten out of control at times for them to know what's priority, what's, you know, the main focus. So, yeah.
Which I think is a whole skill set in itself to, you know, when you're whitewater rafting, you ride the wave, not try and stop the river.
Yeah.
You know, so
absolutely.
It's funny because the skill set of getting to do bigger and bigger numbers, you know, when it comes to rapids, the skill set has to do with pivoting, adapting, dealing, not like forcing and pre-planning and all of those things.
Yeah.
But, one of the myths that we really looked at is this whole thing on change fatigue and people being tired and that whole thing. And it makes me really consider a couple of things. One is when people are saying there's too much change or we're change fatigued, I like to look is there a way that we're part of the problem? Like, are we bringing some of this on ourselves? And when I ask people like, so tell me about too much change, they usually focus on the organization doing something to them, like they're a victim. Like, well, the organization rolled this out and they rolled that out and they rolled this out and
didn't plan it well.
And plan it well. And it wasn't tied up with a bow and it wasn't, perfect. And I think when you get to the point where organizations are rolling out big initiatives, you're into some pretty desperate measures. Like, you're really far from the point where, as an individual, if you had done what you need to do to stay a ready person, you would not be suffering right now because you would not have to be told what to do.
Yeah.
Like, I hardly ever come and roll out initiatives in my company because I expect people on the daily to be improving and doing what they need to do.
And one metric of that I've heard you say a lot that I think is just so beautiful is, what's your response to here's what we're doing next? Are you like, yes, I thought that was coming and I was wondering when we were going to do that? Or are you like, what? Again, that whole chronic shock syndrome is a good first initial look at how you're taking that as a team or as an organization.
That is a good diagnostic.
Like, what, that surprise, or is it more, okay, I knew that was maybe coming and now
makes sense.
How neutral are you on it?
I think that's a good thing to point out to listeners. If you are going through what we call chronic shock syndrome, where you're surprised a lot and that you're panicked a lot because you're surprised, you will often, to feel better, blame your organization or blame, reality or blame your customers. Yeah. And, that whole surprise, panic, and blame is a sign. It's a informal measurement of your own readiness.
Yeah.
If you're showing up every day and you're feeling pretty panicked and you're into a lot of blame and you're surprised a lot by what you're asked to do or the disruptions, you need to look at that because that is an informal measurement of your readiness. People who maintain a state of readiness aren't perfect people, but they aren't surprised a lot. They're like, if you roll out something, people are like, yeah, I saw that coming. I've been reading about it, on blogs.
I've been about that at a conference.
I'm talking to people in our industry.
That's been podcasts are talking about that trend. Yeah.
Because people think we're changing so fast. I would say part of the problem in business is we're changing so slowly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, the need for change is urgent because it's met with so much resistance. And so I think that there's this big tension out there right now where people are feeling change fatigued, but their fatigue is coming from resisting change, not going with change.
Absolutely.
I worked with a really kind of, I would say, kind of a nutty doctor. Yeah.
But I remember this.
He just had a dry sense of humor. He was very entertaining. And so back in the early days when I was doing social work, I would, for extra money, I would moonlight in the emergency rooms on Saturday nights. And people kind of made fun of me because I actually love the work. I love working with people who have those needs and they feel like the only place they can, come, unfortunately, is the emergency room. But my heart opened up to them. But one night we were standing there and the snow was starting to fall and there's a nice layer of ice getting laid down, some freezing rain. And I started just move into like get ready mode, like readiness. I'm like, should we be calling some radiologists, or radio x-ray techs in? And the doc was kind of messing with me. He's like, well, why would you want all those in? And I go, well, I think we're going to get pretty busy. And he's like, why? And I go, well, I think we're going to have a lot of falls. Like the weather's getting nasty.
Ice out there.
And he goes, he kept, doing this why. He was just being kind of a little stinker. And I go, stop it. I go, as well as I do, people get hurt falling and that we're going to have a lot of people in here. And he goes, Sai, he goes, people don't really get hurt falling. And I'm like, And then he goes, Sai, people get hurt resisting falling. And I'm like, that was a big mic drop for me. That was big wisdom shared in the ED.
Yeah.
Because I thought about it. And when you think about it, if you're going to fall and you don't want to get hurt, go big.
Oh, yeah.
Tuck in every like breakable appendage and like put some energy into it and go totally into it. Thing, yeah, roll out of it. It's like that's what Chevy Chase did. For those of you that are old enough to remember Chevy Chase and his amazing Saturday Night Live falls. If not, Google that. But it's like, what we do is the dumbest irrational thing. We stick out all of our breakable parts. Like our fingers can we panic, and then we stick out all of our breakable parts, and then we blame somebody for not, salting the sidewalks, which is a good idea, safety folks.
Yeah.
But, and I started to think about that when it comes to change. Is it change that hurts, or is it that we are resisting change hurts? And it started just to feed into some I think a lot of the work I do is like, let's look at this in a counterintuitive way.
And there's you can go example by example. I've seen where that fits. And that whole resistance piece is the moment you start falling behind, that's really your only option, is to start resisting change, because that's where it might expose you as incompetent for where our organization's going. Or if it's right now, it seems to be a lot of new technology coming in. And so we see that a lot, where that same idea that the doc, the nutty doc told you is coming out each and every day with the clients we're working with. So
I think that's a big bottom line, Alex, I want to really emphasize is when you're not keeping up with your own readiness, you really kind of paint yourself metaphorically into a corner where your only option at some point becomes resistance. Mm-hmm. Because as you said, otherwise, if I don't resist, I'll be exposed. And so you get into the most primitive part of your brain, and that ego resisting change is trying to preserve out of fear us being exposed, that we aren't ready for what's next.
Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. What I see with there's too much change is when I get diagnostic to it and I start looking for what is my part in that as an individual. What can other people do? How can accountability and ego bypass address this chronic issue out there where people are saying that they're change fatigued? And I would say that every time I hear a big organizational initiative, I can track it back to someone skipping a daily upgrade in their current position. So when people roll out, they're like, you don't understand, the organization's making us do this. And I'm like, well, it is escalated to the level that organizations have to mandate things because you willingly skipped these, what I call daily upgrades
from the universe. Yeah.
20 invitations in the universe, continuous improvement. One of the best examples I have comes out of healthcare. And I started hearing more and more people say, oh my gosh, one of the big initiatives we have right now is for our care team to do hourly rounding. And, it's being forced upon us. And there's so many organizations that are like, we've relaunched this thing like 8 times and we keep bringing it back and we keep like having to relaunch it, and which is a whole nother problem, rename it. And, but the first problem is when people are like, it's this new initiative. And I'm like, what do you know for sure? Let's check the facts. Is it a new initiative? And the reality is,
it is.
Yeah, they think it's totally
telling us.
They think it's totally new. When you go back to nursing conferences and you look in the research, this new initiative was presented like 25 years ago. So if you were a nurse at a conference 25 years ago and you saw the evidence, like nurses are fantastic at conferences, like they are very research based. I love nurses. I think they're just brilliant. They'll have like some storyboard where we're like, we looked at this and here's a new best practice. If you saw the information on hourly rounding, it looked like the holy grail back then. We can decrease falls. We can increase safety. We can enhance the patient experience. We can improve outcomes. We can decrease strokes.
Like things we're focused on, and it's all of them in one initiative.
All the things we're worried about. This very simple, just batch your work, be intentional, go in. If you haven't, been in there consistently, like at least once an hour, go in, proactively potty your patients so that they don't have to get up and fall. Educate them that I'm in here every hour so you can have my full attention then.
Yeah.
That means they're only going to call you for like kind of urgent situations. It just solves so many things. So when I saw the poster board, I'm not a nurse. I'm like, dang, I'd be doing that. Nurses are independent practitioners. They can structure their work any way they want. They manage their own time.
Yeah.
There was not one obstacle for a singular nurse to say, you know what, how I'm going to do my work. Yeah. How I'm going to do my work is incorporate hourly rounding and batch process my work. But very few nurses did that. So when all of the scrutiny came and we're struggling to make sure that we have zero falls and we're struggling to make sure that the patient experience is great, we keep bringing up the obvious to the point where because of lack of adaptation and lack of adoption, finally the organization needs to say, this is it, folks. Dang it. Everybody's hourly rounding, right? It's the new initiative. So I think this whole thing for change fatigue is that many times, one, we're fatigued from resisting it. And two, when we say there's so many change initiatives, part of that is our natural consequence for not quickly adapting things in bite-sized pieces, because it's not hard to do things in bite-sized pieces.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. But like if you don't open your mail for 3 months, you dread opening your mail. But if you open it every day, you're writing out maybe, well, we don't write checks anymore, but you're doing, automatic deposit once a month.
This is going to tie back into enabling though, isn't it? Where, a little
No, it is.
We don't want to put the responsibility just on the leaders.
But the leaders are the ones who also allow it.
There's so many of these little invitations from the universe we just talked about. And if you enable 20 skips, then we have an interesting conversation where it's that whole initiative and it feels absolutely like, wow, this is changing fast after skipping the 20 upgrades. So it's a little bit back to...
It is back to enabling because that's where we negotiate the non-negotiables. Like a non-negotiable in medicine is that you are responsible for your own continuing education to maintain your licensure. And that non-negotiable is that you need to practice modern medicine. And I know it's not that simple. My medical people will say it's a little bit more, complicated than that. But that's also your ego talking. Your ego hates simple truth. Like your ego's like, oh, it's far more complex than that. Well, then, instead of going either or, like the ego goes to extremes, just go, you know what? There are some things that I know would be a better way to work and I resisted.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So I think we do negotiate non-negotiables with our folks, or quite honestly, we use old change mindsets where it's like, we'll do this one change and then freeze for a while. And we'll do this one change and then freeze for a while. There's just no more comfort in, I'll take a rest period. Now, that doesn't mean you don't do self-care and take some time out. But what happens a lot of times is that people are waiting for, when things slow down, I'll catch up instead of just getting really good at being comfortable with it being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother session, but I had a recent coaching session for myself where, and we're going to release these very cool coaching sessions after I'm through this process to show you guys what good coaching looks like. Cool. I'm getting coached, but the difference between self-soothing and self-care. And self-care has to do, with how I grow and develop and increase my resilience. Self-soothing is where I find self-relief. So a lot of times leaders confuse, how do I give my people relief rather than how do I help them, give them care. Relief is enabling, letting them off the hook, bending reality, lowering standards, colluding with people, sympathizing, giving them excuses. Where care is, let me help you grow the capacity to handle this. And I think human potential has unlimited capacity.
I agree with you. Yeah.
And it's only when we're in higher consciousness, we're toggled up, those types of things. So it's just interesting, as we roll things out that should be no-brainers. People should just say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I'm behind. Let me modernize my skill sets. Yeah. But when we roll things out, in the name of efficiency, people don't often respond that way.
Absolutely. Where it should be just like, thank you for a great, process or great efficiency. So then this will free me up for higher level work, which a lot of times we go into sessions, our teams are asking for. They're like, I would love to do some more empowering work, some more higher level work. And the very thing we're trying to do to free that up is the thing that as humans we resist. And so it becomes this big cat and mouse game I've seen where it's like, if we can't say yes to a process that would help with efficiency, and you're asking us to do higher level work or more important projects or more exciting work, it's like we're fighting what is it, like a two-sided war? It's like we are trying to give you that if we say yes to the standardization. It is this weird thing. I help people peel back in the sessions, but a lot of times we don't always get there because this resistance to change piece.
It's so interesting because
it's a triangle happening there.
It is. Well, and the ego is really good at saying, I would love to be that or do that. And then providing all the excuses why they can't.
Yeah.
I was recently at another conference where a lot of people were talking about imposter syndrome, and some of it is lack of confidence, where you continually doubt yourself. You don't feel like you belong, or you compare like your insides to other people's outsides, and they look so put together and they look like they know what they're doing, and you feel on the inside like pretty scared. But there's another imposter syndrome that I think people suffer with, and it is their high self saying, "Here's what I want. Here's what great looks like," and it's their ego saying that's impossible. And so you start to feel like an imposter, because when you say, I want to be part of something great, you're an imposter if you're in low self, if you're toggled down, because that's a big lie.
Yeah.
It's not, there's no integrity besides, yeah, I agree. We want great outcomes for our patients. And then I find 100 reasons I'm not wanting to do that.
Yeah.
And then you tell me you feel like an imposter. That's because you are. Like, that's because your ego's playing you, and you'll never feel settled when you're delivering less than your potential.
Yeah. Are they saying with that, a lot of the imposter syndrome? I mean, that's a fight with our own mind. There's no one involved in that.
There's no one involved in that.
Interesting.
Now, for some people, it can truly be like more confidence and their self-limiting beliefs and they're like thought distortions, but even thought distortions come from the ego.
Yeah.
But I just started thinking about it because normally we go, oh, that's too bad you have imposter syndrome, you have these limiting beliefs that the world gave you. And I'm like, well, if you continue to have imposter syndrome, you have lack of accountability to questioning your thinking.
Interesting.
And so there's a lot of things that we say yes to and then kind of, wheeled back. But it's pretty basic. Like, leaders have two responsibilities. You have all these resources given to you: people, money, equipment, intellectual property, access to clients. And you as a leader, a team, need to deliver to the organization efficiency, return on investment of those assets.
Absolutely.
You also need to deliver loyalty, which is value in the form of a relationship.
Yeah.
It's stickiness. It could be the engagement of your people, or it could be loyalty from your clients, or even just the many people you work with to get work done, right? So when I teach about efficiency, there is really just good science about how to increase efficiency at work. Basically, if you want outcomes that are reliable, low variance, knowledge transferable, low cost, like
low risk,
repeatable, like outcomes that you can just book it time after time after time. Most of the time, those outcomes come from processes, standardized processes. I'm a fan of standardized. Everything you can get your hand on. If it can be standardized or automated or eliminated, like a lot of standardization is like, let's eliminate 5 of these like steps, right? And standardize it, clean it up. Standardization is what really drives efficiency. And that's all about standardized processes. I find standardized processes so soothing.
Oh man. We teach good mental processes. It's in some ways a standardized process.
It really is.
Getting there.
Yeah. How do you overcome, waste in your workplace processes? How do you overcome emotional waste, which is what drama is mental processes. People are happier when they use good mental processes. And it's so simple. What do I know for sure? Who am I with that thought? Who would I be? What would great look like? Anyway, what is ironic to me is that people are complaining about their jobs being too big and they have so much to do and there's so much change, that as we roll out standardized processes, you would think people would just be like, oh my gosh, thanks for the efficiency. And I'm shocked that people don't say that. Most people jump in with like, whoa, wait a minute, right? I'm so special. That's the biggest one I hear.
We're on the 4th floor here.
Yeah. I think I've told you that story. The IRS suggested that I roll out a change in accounts payable with some of our clinics. And we had centralized AP. And I went to roll out a suggested change by the IRS. That's kind of a non-negotiable. And I rolled it out to the 4th floor because we had our AP separated, and they actually took it pretty good. They're like, okay, no problem. I went to the 3rd floor and they're looking at me like I have a hole in my head. And they're like, Sai, you don't understand. We're pretty special. We're the 3rd floor AP. And I'm like, what is so special? There's a difference of 12 feet. Like, but they had really even carved out just by where they sat. Like they really wanted to hold on to their processes. But most people, when you roll out efficiency, they meet you with low self and they start arguing because they want their preference to trump potential. Potential Absolutely. Is if we had efficiency, we would deliver return on resources for the business. We would have measurable processes. We could figure out
non-corrupt data to see if it is, as efficient as we'd like it to be. Absolutely. Yeah.
Because you can't get good data. Is this process working if people aren't compliant to the process?
Well, my favorite is add on another step. Then we might have full process improvement teams that jump in there to improve the process that we've never complied with in the first place. It just gets to be
it's really, a mess. It's a mess. And so I look at, kind of like chain or falling down, people don't get hurt falling down, they get hurt resisting. So I look at this irrationality because if I want easier work and I want to do more meaningful work,
just effortless work,
then I should love any standardization brought my way and completely just say it maybe not my preference, but it certainly will benefit all. Mm-hmm. I'll standardize that. Then I free myself up to do meaningful work and I make my life easier. But people respond with things like, I'm so special. How we do it isn't broken, even though I've complained about it for 10 years. But the I'm so special one time I rolled out a new process that was standardized, because we merged together all these companies with the hope that we can leverage our size so that a breakthrough in one part can quickly be amplified throughout the organization. So I rolled out
That sounds beautiful. Yeah. It just sounds so, when you say it like so that, simple. I'm like, that's it. Yeah.
So I rolled this out and I had a group in medicine and they're like, Sai, you don't understand, we're really special. And I happened to be a little sarcastic that day. I go, actually, that's why I'm here, because your data is so special. Like you have such outlying data and it's so variable. And
what outcomes are so off from what we're looking for.
People get confused about the enemy. The enemy is variance. Mm. Like people, even when they improve processes, they forget that if there's variance and accountability to those processes, that variance is the enemy.
Yes.
Flexibility, I think, is our superpower, right? That we can fill in the gaps where the processes didn't cover. But variance is our first kind of enemy. It's just, it's something that people don't talk about.
That it just had me thinking. I was having a conversation at it was a leadership development workshop I was at, and we were talking a bit about processes in healthcare, and I was getting into, now I usually get really extreme to get the point out there in the conversation to start us off, but it was about the standardization. And one of my colleagues there was, yes, we understand that. And there's a big place, obviously, for following these processes. But she was mentioning that there are some families, I believe it was families it was like Latin American families that in healthcare, they like to have a lot of the family in the room for someone that is sick. And so they want like all the family in there. And for like hourly rounding, back to that example, they might say, we don't want someone checking in all the time because, as a family, we'll do more of the care. And I was interested to see what you think with that situation where it's, yes, we have our standardized process. We know it really leads to the outcomes our organization's trying to drive. But what is that in there? Is that the flexibility piece where that would be a conversation? And she said they're trained on a lot of this. But,
sure.
But where, if that affects your outcomes, because I know I've been in a situation where it's hard to tell your mom, like if she's not helpful in a situation, like in that situation, I can't imagine them being like, actually, I don't want her in here. Or maybe that's a different conversation you have on the side with the patient. And so I thought that was a piece for this flexibility. We had a cool discussion about where is the place to have more flexibility within the process, or do you have to be careful with that?
For me, I think flexibility is what you get freed up to do when you use the process.
Oh, I see.
So like, for me, the meaningful work comes from the care team understanding the family and family preferences and working with them educating them, helping them understand what it's going to be like at discharge. But if I'm haphazard and not like following the standardized processes don't rein us in. They don't control us. They provide a foundation for us.
They actually free you up.
They free you up. And that's what the ego will say, standardized processes limit you. But in higher consciousness, when we're beyond using just our most primitive form of intelligence, people realize that standardized processes free you up. And so what I would say to that, and every situation is individual, and there's so many brilliant caregivers out there. But if like for hourly rounding, if, the family had some preferences either to have many people in the room or, it doesn't mean I give up hourly rounding. It means that hourly rounding evidently is going to include some family members, always towards the eye to the patient. We have some things we're going to be doing together and some things we're going to be talking about. Who would you like to be in the room? Or is this a time that some of your family members can get a little bit of a break?
Absolutely.
But it's the ability to say yes. So if the family wants to do more care, then part of my responsibility is to find things that they can do safely and teaching them how to be safe about it.
Yeah.
So that I'm not just giving up like, see, I can't do standardized processes because the family wants to intervene.
Yeah.
If you're not in ego, you're saying yes and.
Absolutely.
Yes, I will use standardized processes to free me up to do what I think will really enhance the patient experience and response to their preferences and, their cultural backgrounds. But those caregivers too, they're also always watching for family dynamics.
Yeah.
And so sometimes they do give the patient a break. They're like, this really is a private procedure. We need you to, because they want a one-on-one relationship with you as well. So really good caregivers don't use family as an excuse. They use, that's the reality. They try and find the best solutions in those reality. But, for me, it's like, helping someone to the bathroom, even if family wanted to help, if they aren't that trained up on it, or they won't be routine about using like a gate belt or something, then I find ways for them to help, but I'm still in there
educating
and moving the patient. So I'm like, I love that you like to help. But one of the things you could do is get some warm water on some of these towels for this person to wash their hands afterwards. So
love that.
We always have so much more influence than we think we have. The ego will find all kinds of reasons why we can't influence. But if you're high-minded, you'll find all the ways you can influence. And I think it has to do with, one, how quickly we can say yes to what it is. And then our influence comes with the and.
Yeah.
Most people think their influence comes from the no. I'm going to be rigid. That's a process. No. And so again, so much of this is you can't teach people in just a single class. You've got a role model. You've got to, accountability. The first step in developing accountability is challenge. And that's not just about giving people more work. It's challenging their thinking and challenging them to grow in their approach. And, one of the things I see a lot, though, when I leaders roll out something standardized, is that the ego, when people are in ego, they want to quickly optimize it so it favors their preference.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm always like, okay, you can't optimize before you standardize. But people we go back to this hourly rounding, like we roll out hourly rounding. They're like, well, we'll do that, but we want a different template. We want to call it something different. And we should have some council meetings on, whether we should put that first or that second. We need a different checklist. But you don't know what you need. That's just stalling.
Yeah.
It's like, what if you just surrendered and did the basics? And then we had good data because we had people complying with a standardized process that we could know what the next optimization would be.
Yeah.
But people who want to optimize many times want to optimize in favor of their preference. And so I see this all the time that I work, especially in, high tech and healthcare, is that people want to get fancy and clever before we've ever gotten solid.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm like, let's get solid so that we have some common language and a frame of reference. We have some standardization. And then based on data, not your personal preference, we can get fancy and clever.
It reminds me of just in our own company, when we first started really getting you on video more and doing more of this content distribution to our fans. And we could have gone out in a big way and tried to, hire an agency. We could have bought all this equipment. And I remember we just started with a simple vlogging camera. And we're like, let's just sit, side down in front of the camera and just do a topic. And then one of us just learn the basics of editing. And we're going to follow the most simple way to put video content of Psy on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. And we didn't start with like this whole big plan. It would have stalled the whole thing because it's a little bit overwhelming to start. We just started with like, let's do one video. Let's try and execute it along this one idea of a process. And then from there, once you understood the micro, like the one little bit of success of it and got some good data, then you can do it really big on the macro. Yeah. And I've seen that's a lesson I've been really thinking about goes with what you're saying, I think, which is just try the basic template, the first step, get some information, some data, and then you can do a little bit of optimizing from there as you run it through a few times.
I think that's really important too, because it gets you instant impact. The ego, and I'm not saying we don't need planning, and I'm not saying we don't need research, and it's just that most of us aren't involved in that.
Yeah.
What we can do is, like, a lot of people want to sit and think before they get inspiration or before they get ideas. But the next idea and inspiration comes from interaction with the universe. It comes with like getting out there and doing something in an intentional way and then getting more information. There's some information you can't get from where you sit.
Yeah.
And some inspiration you can't get from where you sit, right? Yeah. So in some of that, people have to, healthcare, we're talking pretty big risk, but some of that for other people in business, what's good enough and what can get us started, and alignment, many times people all in to a common idea is more powerful than the perfect plan. And in today's world, there's a skill set is almost like improvisation, where I can say, yes, I'm in, and then use my expertise to move this thing forward and manage the risk. But a lot of people want to influence from no.
Yeah.
And no should be used when it's unethical, it's illegal, it's marginalizing, part of the population. Yeah. Like, there are some places for heck no, right? But a lot of times I have found in my career that the ability to say yes to something that I see has some imperfections, but we could all agree to and standardize. And that's why a lot of times consensus decision-making gets down. Consensus isn't we all agree. Consensus is that we could all endorse that because there's no lethal objections. It's not agreement. Like, I think that's exactly what we should be doing.
Yeah.
But a lot of people get into consensus decision making and believe that it has to be something we all agree on. And that's where we then get the safest, most unimpactful, mundane,
tailored to preference,
potential again. So it's interesting to me, that for me, we can't reveal reality and the variances until people are willing to standardize. And it's the ego that resists standardization, because your higher self would be relieved by standardization, right? Yeah. And once you meet people that are pretty evolved, their life becomes more and more simple and more standardized, and their thinking becomes more and more standardized. And it's like, they're pretty happy because they have some good habits, some good discipline, and they aren't making anything too complex. So complexity, the ego loves that because it's a great thing to hide behind. It's like, you can't really hide behind complexity.
That gets me thinking about a recent session I was at, where once we worked through that and some people had some insights on that, then I saw the whole extreme came out in the form of a question, which was, okay, now that we're focused on standardization, I see that that's about efficiency. Now, in order basically for us to really go with that, we will need you to come up with like the 26-page handbook.
Yeah, tell us exactly
what the process is to move this forward. And I think the challenge there comes when we're doing some things that have never before been done, or we have some ideas on what the process could be. What do you have to say or add about that, where it's like, if we go to the other extreme, and we know there's always two far ends of the spectrum, but it's like, okay, if it's all about efficiency, now please give me then this best practice you're talking about, and I'll then follow that checklist.
Yeah. It's so funny because a lot of times we're with groups to one extreme where we're like, just accept standardization, go all in, be compliant, and help us optimize this later. And those are the folks who just want to be total renegades. And those are cases where we have some best practices. We have some evidence-based practices. But I presented to folks who have been rogue and we're like, okay, we're going to look towards standardization, and the ego is behind all extremes. So when you're in a session and people go clear the other extreme, you've just kicked their ego in the face. They're like, fine, well then we'll just be little robots and you standardize everything and you just tell us what to do. Yeah. And my question is, then what value do you add?
Yeah.
The mix is we standardize things so that you are freed up to do the big stuff. Like, we don't need you as a human if we can automate and standardize everything. It's not then standardize everything and tell me what to do and I'll be a robot. It's let's take our work and find out where standardization brings us efficiency.
Yeah.
And then let's take your expertise and use that to figure out how to do some of the bigger stuff that's not able to be standardized. And so it's such a passive aggressive cop out when people are like, well, then I'll just be a robot. You have all the control. It's like, no. Let's stay in this. Let's not take the either or. Where's the and in this? And so it comes to whether your decision-making rights, people who are, confused about their decision-making rights get really confused about this. But every day in my life, there's some things I'm the decision maker. There's some things I'm invited to the table to consult on. And there's some things I'm just informed on. And the quicker I get clear about which of these, whatever we're talking about is,
merits,
then I can respond with a yes, no matter what. So if I'm the decision maker, I got to get very clear that I'm not just the person who can say no. Decision making is not veto power. And a lot of people want to be maintain veto power, but a true decision maker can say yes or no. And so a lot of us, it's like, well, I'm like, are you the decision maker? They're like, well, I'm not going along with it. It's like, you're not the decision maker. Consulting, if you're invited to the table as the role of a consultant, you don't tell people what to do. You tell people what they could do. So you're not there except for when something's illegal or to say no. You're there to say, tell me what you want to do. And my name is yes, and I will tell you multiple ways to get there. And I'm not attached to any outcome because you're the decision maker. I'm clean about that. I am not here to overly influence. I'm here to guide and consult.
Yes.
But most of us in a lot of our lives ignore the things we could just check off our list by joyfully accepting that that's just something I'm informed on.
Yeah.
I'm not going to burn energy at every stop sign because the city planners didn't ask me if it merited a roundabout, right? Yeah. And so if I can respond a lot with good to know, I'm in, then I can clean off about half of my to-do list.
Yeah.
And I can do some power consulting out of my expertise. So instead of giving my opinion all the time, which is my preference, I can power consult out of my expertise. And when I'm a decision maker, then instead of just coming from ego about what I want, I actually use decision-making strategy that tries to limit my decision-making bias and, does all of that. And one of the skill sets that I often work with people on is just the ability to say yes. But the ego is so sophisticated. A lot of times people say yes, and then they'll bring up all these issues that basically negates their whole yes.
It was like just the quick way to get in the conversation. Like, I'm in, but let me talk about,
Your energy needs to be, I'm in, and let's talk about how we could do this instead of I'm in, except for it's so complicated, I've got to scare you out of this.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important. I mean, even in our lives, we can do this as a team. It's like people who come to training want access to our books. They love our books. They buy a ton of our books. Thank you, listeners.
Yeah.
And even our team can be like, well, it's a no-brainer that we need books at every session, either provided to the company or that we have books, provided. And everybody on my team is willing to do that. But if we're not careful, our conversations can quickly unwind it. It's like, yeah, I'm all in. We need books. Well, wait a minute, except in this case. And does that mean, that's going to be really hard?
And what if they say this?
Yeah. Our energy gets away from how we could to why we can't. And that's why I say leaders manage energy, but we're all leaders. And it's like, how do we pick up the energy and keep focusing on what's our bodacious goal and how can we make that happen? Not Pollyanna, not positive thinking, not ignoring the risk, but just pretty quickly, like, how can we make it happen? Yeah. I like visual stuff. The ego hates visual stuff. So that's why Cy Wakeman likes visual stuff. I like to get things visual so that we get out of like the discussion. And one of the things that I came up with recently, and we're still kind of working on this, but this conversation early stages reminds me of this. Like, when we're working on something, people have like all these questions, right? And so I thought we should write, go back to 8th grade grammar. There are questions that start with if and when and who and where and how and why, right? I think that when we learned like journalism, they're like, you have to answer the what, the who, the how, the why, or whatever. Well, I thought, what if you wrote like on a coaster on a block these questions, and visually, as you talked through them, let's say they're on a chip or a piece of wood. As you talk through these, the organization and you had to gather which was yours. So all these things are at the center of the table, right? Yeah. Just chips with questions on it.
Hating this.
Yeah. Okay. So then you're rolling something out and you're like, okay, here's what we've been asked to do next, or here's a new strategy, or here's a new regulation, or here's something that's
the marketplace is asking for.
Yeah. This is our customers have spoken loudly. And as a leader, it's like, my hope is I can manage your energy away from why we can't to how we could. And so we do a lot of tools with that. But I got to thinking, so like if I had these chips down, and every time somebody asks a question starting with the word, they grab the chip. And then we decided to help their ego and help them understand if they got to keep it, if they really own that. So like if somebody is like, focus on if, like, whoa, are you sure this is where the organization should go?
I'm not sure if we should even be doing this.
Yeah, I'm not sure, so we'll if we should, like, I'm not sure. And so Alex, you take the chip. You're like, well, I'm going to take if. I'm not sure if we should be doing this. And then we talk, like, you're the employee. I am part of a leadership team. It's not about mandate or hierarchy. We just got to have an honest dialogue. Like, do you own the if? And I would say 9 times out of 10, if not more, the organization, not the employee, owns the if. Like, should we be doing this? Well, it's what we've decided. Now, that 1%, 10%, that 1 out of 10, I get the if, like, should we question this against our values and against our ethics? But that's usually not what we're questioning
against. And that's
against.
usually back to illegal, immoral, unethical.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's usually not that. Absolutely.
And then a lot of times somebody comes up with like, well, is this the right time to do this? That's more about the when. And there's no solid answer for each one of these, but it's the dialogue that's important. It's like, when somebody picks up, it's like, I'm not sure this is a good time. It's like, is that your decision to make? Or is it your decision to relook at priorities if this is priority to make it happen? So like, bottom line, a lot of times we want to talk about if, and we don't own that chip. Yeah. And we want to talk about when, and we don't own that chip.
And especially a lot of times if the decision has already been made in the form of, here's what we're going to do next.
Totally.
And if you come in without some really clear expertise on why the when might not be great, that can stop the action immediately or derail, the meeting.
And the reason I love it is like, you're holding chips that aren't your own. Like, it gets so visual. Yeah. It's like all of a sudden, if I'm over here as an employee and I'm arguing with if we should be doing it, and I'm arguing with like when, and I have all these chips, one, I have to work hard to hold on to those.
Yeah, it's so visual.
Secondly, it's not really, somebody representing the organization can say, give me that back. It's not yours. Yeah. And even the what we should be doing a lot of times is decided for us. So now we've gone through like 3 questions: if, when, what. Yeah, so far, we don't have any that belong to us. Yeah. But there is a big one that belongs to us, which is the how. Like that's the chip I can cleanly pick up off the table and say, let me give you the expertise. I may not be involved in the if we should be. I may not be involved in the when or, even the what at times. But my big chip, my big power play, the big contribution I make is the how.
Yeah. So true.
And so if we end up in this discussion where I very clearly can give up my ownership rights to the, the what, the when, and the if, I can fully own the how. And that puts me in a place of like power and influence, because that's my expertise to say, here are all my concerns. And so a sneaky one that comes up is a lot of people want to go clear back and they want to go, why?
Oh yeah. That's the one we forgot.
And it takes us back to the beginning of our podcast and the conversation of, arguing with reality and stalling and the ego and the why. And it's not that I don't believe in people having the information they need, but the why usually is a sign of lack of readiness.
Yeah. If you find yourself asking why a lot, I've heard you say that many times, and I've been thinking about it in my own development. And if you hear it or you find yourself really wondering why, that is such a point to readiness.
It is
so clear.
If you're asking why and you're chronically shocked, which takes us back to the beginning of this is more about your own personal readiness. Now, I'm not saying that people don't need to know why, that there are some times that why is, good information that I can really help you move forward. But a lot of times our why is a stall mechanism, because if you've been in the industry and you really have to ask that question, I'm worried about how involved you've been in the industry. So I'm in healthcare a lot, and I had somebody come up and they're like, Sai, you don't understand. We are always buying new health systems. And I mean, nobody really brings out and tells us the why in change management. Nobody's really explained to us why we're doing this. And I just gently ask the person, right? I'm like, really? You've been in healthcare 25 years. We continue to merge and consolidate. You really have no guess at the why. And they're like, powerful. They're like, well, I know what they say. They say is that we need more lives, more population under our coverage area to leverage and be able to share costs and centralize support. I'm like, man, sounds like sounds why.
Like a great why.
Sounds like you don't want to. And a lot of times people use the question to cover up, not my preference, I don't want to. And they keep asking kind of the why. And as long as they keep asking the why, you keep giving information that then they feel they're in the position to negate. And that's where they pick back up the chips of the what, the if, the why can be a sneaky way back into the top of the hour and the discussions on these. So I haven't perfected it, but I think visually, if people saw their behavior that in a meeting, they're always reaching for some chip that's not theirs, they would realize they're playing outside their lane a lot and they're not adding value, because we get under responsible for what's ours, which is the expertise in the how, and over responsible for what's other people's business.
Yeah. And you talk about that as a form of when we call it emotional expensiveness, is really when you're playing the wrong role for what the situation merits. And so if you were in that meeting with these visuals carrying all of these blocks, dropping them at times because you have 5 in your hand, it's like that is a very telltale sign that you might be in the wrong role quite often. And I wanted to add back to the how, not to go back, but that's where it comes into what we started talking about early on in the conversation is then when you have the how and you're clear after that example that that's usually where we're at, that's where we can look at scanning the environment, and not just in our own industry, but borrowing from the best practices of others.
Absolutely.
I've heard you talk a lot about how many times we try and really stay in our industry, but you can generalize processes from other industries that are pretty innovative. And that's a great place to start as a best practice that try that on for size where that could work in our organization. Or even completely different sectors or industries.
Totally. But, or even challenge your thinking. Some of the best discussions I've had are people not in my industry, but people who, however, are major learners. So just recently, I've had so many in-depth conversations with people. And one thing I noticed, people who seem stuck and can't come up with like helpful hows are people who aren't listening to podcasts, who aren't reading, who aren't like involved in blogs, and who aren't connected. And we know that resilience comes from being a good crowdsourcer. It isn't that you're the smartest person in the room. It isn't that you're the smartest person in this industry. Resilience is that you have the broadest network of helpful resources, and that they're positive towards you and that you have access to them. It's like the most resilient person is not the smartest or the most persevering or the one who just outlives 20 managers. The most resilient person is the one who has the biggest network outside of kind of their immediate circle, and that leverages that network.
Absolutely.
And so recently, well, I'll back up. So I'm starting to write my next book, right? I'm starting to write my next book.
Oh, newsflash.
Newsflash. Oh, I hate to even admit that out into the universe because it's a little bit of a lovely, beautiful process. But it's like, I'm talking about writing this book.
One is the house. There's no if, when, what, or why. You got to, it's the
I think the fans own the if, what, when, or why.
Yeah.
I only get to do the how, and I'm resisting. Isn't that funny? I teach what I need to learn. What's interesting about that is that about 6 months ago, I was feeling like a little stuck. I'm like, I don't even know what to write the book on. And I realized that I had not been reading as much. So my Amazon kept delivering, but my pile grew bigger, like in my office. And that I wasn't connecting as much with people outside my industry. I was basically going to work and going to the next city. So I started connecting with people who are quoting like all these new resources. And, you know, like there's some people that I've been with lately that are so fascinating to me that I basically in my journal am just like writing book after book and this podcast and this blog and realize that how insular even I can get. And so, I mean, it's just interesting with that resilience, how getting your head really around accessing knowledge on a regular basis and interacting with super smart, curious people. You know, it goes back to Michael Bungay, staying there with Box of Crayons. If you haven't read The Coaching Habit, read that. He has a new book coming out. And it's like, stay curious 1 minute longer.
Oh, I love that. And
I think our energy ebbs and flows in relationship to our curiosity. So, I mean, I think direct relationship with reality lets you get, you know, a real view, and that's motivating. But if you want inspiration, it doesn't come from your leader. It comes from your own level of curiosity. Yeah. And the inspiration and motivation, I think, are really related to curiosity, which is a whole nother podcast. Alex, every time we get together, like we could go on a lot.
Yeah.
And we promise we will.
Absolutely.
Keep your questions coming.
We got 100 of them to work through.
We got 100 of them to work through. So we may be podcasting for a while, but keep your questions coming and definitely your responses to what we're saying. I hope today was useful. I always end with an assignment. What should the assignment be? Like put down all your other chips.
I would love for someone to tell someone in their family that's a builder to come up with how we could design this, if, when, what, how, why, like some sort of cool block thing that we could. Yeah, I just think cool. It'd be really fun to see a meeting in that way. And I just think that visual is powerful.
It is powerful. And I don't want to make it black and white in that sometimes I, as an organization, give my people the what. I'm like, here's what we need to accomplish. You tell me the what. So I don't want to make it so simplistic. We're just hitting on this, but I want to make it clear that we've got to decide who owns what and who owns how and who owns if.
In high self, then all the energy can go into with clarity what they actually have as a possibility.
So you're not wasting energy on chips you don't have.
So you're not fighting for if, when, what, how. Then it's all clear. Because a lot of times I find if the group's not clear on that, then it gets frustrating in the meeting, because if maybe you know that and you're not able to say it out loud, then we're all working on different things. Yeah. This would get it clear.
And I think it makes a difference too. And we'll talk later about decision-making model, but if it's pre-decision, a lot of these chips are up for grabs, right? So and a lot of them you can have a lot of influence over, but when it's post-decision, it pretty much gets to where you can add the most values with the chip of the how. And a lot of us want to hold on to chips that aren't our own past
decision.
The point, of decision. So I think that
more on that.
Yeah, more on that coming. So an assignment is if you have a good idea for that, or if you want to elaborate, it's in the early stages, if you want to elaborate on how to use this model. And I think a second assignment is often look in your own possession and see how many chips you have that aren't your own. And if you want life to be free and easy, man, focus on the how we can get this done. We are unlimited in our potential. We are brilliant humans, and the problems we have in front of us are being thwarted because we're not just focusing on the how, we're focusing on all these other things. I think it limits us. I think it takes away our amazing minds from what we could really have impact on in the world. So I'm a fan of how. Yeah. I'm a fan of how. I know other people have talked about when and other things, but thanks for joining Alex Storenai. He is VP of People Evolution. If you don't know about him and his podcast, he has a podcast called The Carvery. He takes a lot of the principles we teach in reality-based leadership, and he shows you how to practice them in his own way, in his life. But what I love a lot about him is he brings a whole different generational viewpoint to our work, in that he is a little closer to those 20-something and 30-somethings than I am. So if you want a bit of a modern view of reality-based leadership, check out The Carvery. It's a great podcast. Have a great week.
Thank you.